Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Kristen White, clinical psychologist and mom of 3, and this is the Mom Degree, where we provide support and tools to help women feel less crazy and be more effective in their role as moms. So if you've been following along, we're in a series right now on shaping our kids' behavior. How do we turn them into little kids that we can be proud of and somewhat confident in as we send them out in the world, and also even enjoy being around? That's what we're talking about. So we've talked about a whole spectrum of starting positive, using praise, using specific plans and behavioral charts, bringing in sort of the negative discipline later of removing privileges, timeouts, spanking, things like that. And if you've been watching, you know that we've geared most of this towards little kids. Not explicitly, but when it's kind of come down on an age, it's been younger. And so what I want to do is to talk about how do we apply all of this to older kids. And some of that's been in there, but I want to make sure it's clear, and I'm going to do my best to do it in one video. So everything we've said still applies. I've kind of said that throughout, and that's still true. We still want to start positive with our older kids, no matter the age. We want to start with the positive. We want to start with a clear plan. We want to start with praise. Then when they act out, we can use all the things we've talked about. They just might look slightly different for older kids. We also want to make sure with our older kids that we're not just reinforcing and shaping their outward behavior, but really going after their heart. Again, still true. It just may look a little bit different and maybe an even bigger deal actually with older kids. So let me walk through some of this of how we're going to translate it. And some of it may be obvious to you and some of it may not, but let me walk through a few of these things. So the first thing is we always want to have clear expectations and rules. Even before we get into disciplining, our kids have to know what we want of them, right? So this is true for our 2-year-old or whatever. That's the age of my son that I've been following through this. But that's true for our 15-year-old too. It's just going to look a little different because with a 15-year-old, we might have to sit down and say, okay, while we're all calm, we always do this when we're calm, our kids are calm, nobody's in a rush to get anywhere, nobody's exhausted, right? As much as we can, we pick a good moment and we say, these are the expectations for you, right? We might even write them down in house rules or goals or whatever that are posted someplace that everyone can see them. So we always try to be clear about what we want from our children, but that becomes an even bigger deal with older kids because the older they are, obviously, the more they can kind of hold that, understand it, read it. So at any age, we want them to know what we expect of them. We want to be clear with it, but with older kids, it may take on a totally different, more in-depth vein where we've even written it down. Maybe they're a part of this conversation of what time is their curfew, what time do they have to have their homework done by, right? So all of this may be worked out in advance. And we may even, hopefully, ideally, work out with them in advance what are the privileges and consequences. So if they follow the rules, here's what they get. I don't know, you decide. They get to go out with their friends on Friday night. They get their allowance. They get, I don't know, whatever. Here's what they get. It may be a new privilege they can earn, or it just may be you get to do your normal privileges, right? But then if they don't follow the rules, here's going to be the specific consequences, right? And one of the things we're going to talk about with older kids is another piece that's different is that they can be a part of that conversation. So you don't have to just ask them, what do you want the consequence to be, and leave it at that, but that they can give some input. So we'll talk a little more about that. So that's the first thing that we have to kind of adjust for older kids is really having a little bit more in-depth conversation about what's expected and what's going to happen in a very simple, clear, straightforward manner in a way that is so simple they could tell it back to us or tell a friend. Hey, here's what I have to do and here's what happens if I do it and here's what happens if I don't. You want it to be that clear and understandable. With some of your kids, it might even be advisable to make them repeat it back to you. I know they're going to hate that, but we want it to be that understandable that they're capable of that. So that's the first thing with older kids. Then other things, we obviously are just going to adjust the praise, right? It's going to sound different if I'm praising a 2-year-old or a 15-year-old. I'm going to adjust it. We don't call it timeout anymore, right? We call it grounding, right? So it's different. And when you ground them, you make sure that they're not in a place with a bunch of toys, books, technology that sort of takes away the punishment. when we adjust, whatever it is, we're just going to adjust it slightly to make it age appropriate, of course. We can still do variations of behavioral charts. They're probably not going to get stickers up on the fridge though, right? It's going to be more check boxes they have to check off through the week as they're completing whatever their list is. So we can use all of these tools, but of course we're going to morph them to the appropriate age. I'm trying to think what else to say about that. We also really want to emphasize, well, let me save that one. Yeah, I think email me if you guys have questions about how do we take X and morph it to an older kid. I think the only one I wouldn't really morph to older kids is spanking. But again, as you saw in my last video, I wouldn't really use spanking anyways. So maybe I'm not the best person to ask about that. But all the other stuff we talked about, timeouts, ignoring, removing privileges, we use them all. It's just obviously the privileges were removed for a 15-year-old. Now we might be removing TV time. We might be removing their ability to go out with their friends. We might be removing some of their beloved whatever they're into, right? Games or technology or, so again, we morph it to be age appropriate and kid appropriate. It's not going to look the same for every 15-year-old either. What's going to motivate one 15-year-old in terms of rewards and consequences is going to be a different one. So that's the next thing for older kids is just to make it age appropriate. Then the other thing, and this is the other huge difference for older kids, is what happens after they break a rule. Remember, with our little kids, we sit down and we want to talk with them about what happened, why did it happen, and what could you have done differently. That's still true with our older kids. We're still going to try to get at those three things, but it's actually often a much more in-depth conversation, and hopefully at times it involves a lot more listening. We always want to listen, but our older kids are going to actually shut down even faster a lot of times if we're talking too much, and they become more capable of doing some of the talking themselves. So we may have to ask leading questions to help engage them, to help prompt them, whatever, but we're going to listen a lot and get to a more in-depth conversation about why did this really happen, what could you have done differently, those kinds of things. Let me say one thing about that. Sorry guys, my brain is just like all over the place today, but then I have 3 kids and I'm trying to do this. So please forgive me. I'm sure you can understand. So with older kids, now I don't have a 15-year-old, so I can't give you personal examples of 15-year-olds, but I've actually gotten a tiny glimpse of this recently with my 4-year-old. So forgive me for comparing. I'm not trying to do that, but here's what I mean. My 4-year-old, actually almost 4.5, recently have noticed has gotten to the stage more where she can kind of be grumpy about stuff and acting out a little bit more intensely. Maybe this is personality too, but I feel like there's an age factor here. So twice this week I've noticed that she's just been sort of out of sorts, and she's been hitting, well, she doesn't really hit, that's my 2-year-old, stealing toys more, ignoring me more, not listening, just doing all the kinds of stuff she does to piss me off and piss her brother off, and, welcome moms, right? You're in this club. So she's just been doing a lot more of that, and I've been catching it, putting her in timeout, talking to her. But then it's hit a point at both mornings where I've kind of, after the timeout, not just said, hey, why did this happen in this moment? So today, she stole a toy from her baby sister. So it wasn't just, why did you steal the toy? I know you wanted it. But hey, it feels like, I said something like this, it feels like there's kind of a pattern this morning where there's a lot of you not listening, kind of struggling going on. And I'm wondering if there's something more happening than just you wanting this toy. She's 4, so that she needs a little more than that, right? So I waited for her to respond. She doesn't know. Are you feeling something today? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling, is there something going on inside of you that's kind of making this come out? And we were able to talk a little bit, and she said, yeah, she was kind of sad that she wasn't at school today. She's just gone back to school and she really likes it. She's only every other day and she's kind of sad. She misses her friends. She misses some of her toys. Great. So we sat and we talked about that. I said, yeah, it's really hard. I love that you like school. I know it's hard not to be there, especially when some of your other friends are there every day. I really get that. And it's okay to feel that way. It's not okay to act this way as a result. right? So what are we going to do instead? We can talk about this, whatever. But you see, my point is the why, what happened and how do we make it different goes a lot deeper, because what's happening goes a lot deeper, right? And with the 2-year-old, it's just whatever's happening in the moment, and that's what we have to get at. With a 4-year-old or a 15-year-old, there's a whole lot more in there that we're trying to invite out to be able to talk about, empathize, validate, and redirect into the appropriate places, right? So that's where this gets way different with older kids, is these conversations. Also with older kids, I'm going to come back to that, but I'm seeing my time. Also with older kids, it gets different, like I said, in that they may help us when we finish all that with, okay, what are the privileges and consequences? And with our little kids, they're always immediate. It's something right away. That's the timeout and they're done. With the older kid, as you know, obviously the consequences may be much more far-reaching depending on the crime. They may be the next day, they may be the next month, right? We still want them to be soon, but they can hold it a lot longer. And so the consequences may be much more involved, much bigger. And we want to try to make sure they're natural consequences, so they fit the crime. So if they broke something, they have to fix it or pay for it, right? If they hurt somebody, they have to apologize and try to repair the relationship. So we want to try to make sure the punishment fits the crime and that they're natural. And they may help us with that. So after we've finished talking about all of this, it may be like, okay, now, you did blah, blah, blah. You did break this on purpose. I don't know where I'm getting that, but you did do this. What do you think? What do you think would be a fair consequence? Now, again, you don't have to be like, oh, well, you think that? Great. That's the end of that story. You can tell. You actually be surprised. Parents expect kids are always going to make it too mild, and sometimes they will, and we have to say, oh, I think a little bit more than that. I think, okay, we'll go with the grounding idea, but it needs to be a week instead of a day, whatever it is. So you still get to be the parent here. A lot of kids actually are too hard on themselves, though. So we have to say, no, I don't think you need a month. I think a week would be sufficient. So you still get to be the adult, but they can be involved in this conversation because they're learning to self-regulate. You're not going to be there forever, right? So they get to be more and more involved. Now, here's the other thing with our older kids is I hope will be my last thing. It starts as young as possible. Those of you that have 15-year-olds, if you haven't been doing this and you try to sit down now and have this conversation with your 15-year-old, they're going to look at you like, what are you on? And like, who said put you up to this, right? Because this isn't the way you interact with them. So you want to know their heart more than ever. You're scared of what could be going on in there, right? And you really want to know, but it has to start at 2 and 4. It starts when they're little, so that my hope is by the time my kids are 15 and I'm having this conversation with them, they're like, yep, mom. They're like, we know this stuff. And it's easier to get at their heart because they're used to talking with me this way. So if you do have 15-year-olds or whatever, and you're trying to start it now, you may need, it's going to take a lot more effort. It's going to take a lot more of them fighting back. You may even need to get a therapist or someone involved to help you establish that baseline. It's still possible. It's just a lot harder, and they're not going to respond as quickly when they're 15 as they do when they're 2, and they don't know any better because you're establishing the normal. So it's a little harder to start it at that age, but it's not impossible, so don't give up hope. All right, I hope that helps. Those of you that have older kids, your mom challenge is to tell me what questions do you have? How is this working with your 15-year-old, maybe or whatever age? What's one way that you can institute this with them? And those of you that have younger kids, your mom challenge is, how are you starting this now? So when they get to 15 and you want to know what peer pressure, what struggles, whatever are they going through, that they'll talk to you. How are you starting this now? Much love and many blessings. Until next time on The Mom Degree.